Welcome to the second chapter. Today I'm going to go over carbohydrates, why it's important, different types of carbohydrate, the role in the body. I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefit of fibers, the regulation process, absorption and digestion of carbohydrates. We're going to give some examples of sweeteners. So without any further ado, let's start with carbohydrates. So carbohydrates means water and carbon. Okay, so you see this is a carbon atom and this is water. One carbon atom and one water molecule. Okay, so it's more of carbon and water. So this is the carbohydrates. Carbohydrates actually the energy providing carbohydrates created from non-energy providing molecule. And this is very important. So once you think about the carbon dioxide, CO2, and the water, H2O, they are non-energy providing molecules. They get together to produce carbohydrates. And this process called photosynthesis, which we are familiar with, and it happens in plants, actually limited to plants and a handful of bacteria. So we are eating plants such as fruit, vegetables, legumes, grain products, also different type of carbohydrates-rich food to obtain a rich supply of carbohydrates. Okay, beyond the plants where we can find carbohydrates, milk. Yeah, milk and dairy products are also good sources of carbohydrates. But what about the sugar in fruit and vegetable? Is it comparable to artificial edible products? Keep in mind that the water content in fruits and vegetables make up most of the remaining weight. Okay, so carbohydrate is the major non-water content of fruit and vegetables. Okay, so if you want to compare, for example, fruit and vegetable with other artificial and edible products, keep in mind like these natural sources, they have a good amount of water. Cereal grains, for example, and products such as rice, oat, pasta, bread, they contain a relatively higher amount of carbohydrate compared to fruit and vegetable, and this also could be due to the lack of water relatively. So again, animal food such as meat, fish, poultry are virtually lack carbohydrate, so they are void of carbohydrate, and we only focus on milk and some dairy products like yogurt, ice cream, which are the only significant animal-derived carbohydrate providers or sources. So what are the different types and classes of carbohydrate? Here we are going to focus on carbohydrates that found in a greater amount in our diet and those important to our body. So if I mention more about xylose and mannose, I don't think they will be like as familiar to you as glucose, fructose, and galactose. So these are going to be our main focus. Besides the monosaccharide are also serving as a building blocks for larger carbohydrates such as disaccharide, oligosaccharide, and polysaccharide or starches and fibers. So before I just talk a little bit about disaccharide, let's just remember here like glucose and fructose can be found in foods either independently or as part of that food or large carbohydrates, while some galactose is found in certain foods. and mostly found as part of larger carbohydrates. Fructose makes honey and many fruits sweet and also used commercially. I want you to remember examples of disaccharide, lactose, which is more of glucose and galactose, sucrose, glucose and fructose, and maltose or malt sugar, which is maybe part of our diet naturally. We found it in seeds. Could be also found in alcoholic beverages. Sucrose is derived from sugarcane plant and beet. Sucrose-rich product is called sugar, the table sugar, the one that we're using on daily basis. Lactose is primarily the primary carbohydrate found in milk and dairy products. Okay, so please remember these examples by heart. These are kind of complex carbohydrates, large molecules. So in general, monosaccharide and disaccharide referred as simple sugar because they're relatively small carbohydrates and their sweet taste. So let's talk about the second most important part of this lecture, that about fibers that have tremendous health benefits. Fibers, they actually non-starch polysaccharide, part of structural component of plants, and we can find it in different natural sources. And we actually need it because fibers can provide our health with many health benefits and health advantages. Two types of fibers: soluble fibers and insoluble fibers. And it's very important here to know the differences and the major sources and their health benefits. I will give you some examples, but please pay attention for these tables as they're gonna guide you to the main differences and health benefits. If you see the psyllium here, because sometimes you find it in different tables, psyllium fiber is referred to as soluble fiber, although roughly a third of its fiber is insoluble. So, and that's because generally variety of food contain both soluble and insoluble fibers. So if you get food source full of psyllium fibers, almost 30% of that food will contain insoluble fibers. So please remember these examples carefully. So let's talk about the health benefit that we can generate out of consuming these fibers. So let's start with the soluble fibers. Soluble fibers include beta-glucan, mucilage, pectins, and different examples here. There are actually several studies found out that soluble fibers are able to reduce blood cholesterol and as well as blood glucose. Okay, so they may bind to cholesterol in the digestive system and rendering them unavailable for absorption, and similar scenarios for blood glucose. Soluble fibers also playing important role in slowing the transit of food through the upper GI tract, or what we call it gastric gastric emptying time, slow glucose absorption, and playing other important role in terms of diseases such as colon cancer. Soluble fibers playing a significant role in preventing or reducing the risk factors of colon cancer. So, and that was just a brief scenarios. So what about insoluble fibers? So alleviate constipation, lower risk of diverticulosis, which is a situation in which there is an outpouching of the inner wall of the colon, diverticulosis, or as well as diverticulitis, which becoming sometimes impacted with bacteria, and that lead eventually to irritation and inflammation and pain, and sometimes bleeding. So insoluble fibers like cellulose and hemicellulose appear to have a beneficial effect. And using these soluble fibers would be very useful in the formation of feces and in the evacuation process. Broth, for example, is an excellent source of these insoluble fibers and explain why many people experiencing constipation and diverticulosis using brown breakfast like muffin and cereals and other products. So, but how much can I consume of these fibers? So we can consume up to 25 gram, the daily need of these fibers up to 25 gram, but can we go upper? Yeah, if you can withstand it, you can go maybe up to 30 or 40 gram, and especially for those patients having comorbidities and who can really withstand eating this much fibers. So do fiber have any harmful effect? Of course. Of course, if you are eating excessive amount of any substance, we always expect kind of side effect. So in terms of absorption of some mineral, whether fibers interfere with the absorption of minerals such as zinc, let's think about it this way. Some studies or reports have implicated bran as a very strong iron absorption inhibitor. So bran inhibits iron. But in the same way, this action can be reversed by ascorbic acid or vitamin C. And please review the differences between ascorbic acid and vitamin C. Another example could be fiber-rich foods. Also can inhibit zinc absorption, but still, this could be reversed by taking animal protein. So as a conclusion, these interferences or the ability of fibers to inhibit the absorption of minerals seem to depend on other factors involved in the absorption of these minerals. So it's too hard to determine which fiber interfere with the absorption of which mineral, but in general, there's some kind of interference that fiber might interfere with the absorption of zinc, calcium, iron, but in general, as I mentioned, different factors also play a role here. What about intestinal discomfort? Of course, contrary to starch, fiber is not broken down well in your GI system. And this could be explained by the manner this building block or monosaccharide are linked together. So as fiber reaches the colon, bacteria begin to break down some fibers for energy. And this actually produces gases such as carbon dioxide, methane gases, etc. And these gases often lead to uncomfortable bloating, flatulence, and other bothering symptoms. type of flours. So this is another topic in this lecture, types of flour, or the types of bread we are using or eating every day. Nowadays, what do you think about the calories that we are eating as a reality? Actually, we are eating more calories today than in the past. And carbohydrates, the problem is that carbohydrates are making a greater contribution to those calories, like more than 50% of our calories coming from carbohydrates. In countries such as the US, Canada, about half of energy that adults getting from food actually coming from carbohydrates. So, and this is totally in contrast to our Mediterranean diet that we are used to follow, and not anymore, unfortunately. So when we're talking about different flours, we have the white flour, we have the enriched flour, we have the whole wheat flour, and we always should, for a healthy lifestyle, and when you are trying to make your food choices, you actually need to keep in mind that fibers needed, added sugar not needed, whole wheat flour needed, water needed. So there are several important nutrient and regimens, very healthy to follow. And one of it is taking more of whole wheat flour. And if you want to see the reason why is that, it would be much clearer in this picture. So if you're getting the starch part, okay, here you are getting actually the endosperm. It's more of a starch, and this what is constituting or composing the white flour, only the endosperm. If you are interested in enriched flour, and the word enriched here is very interesting because many people are get confused when they hear fortifying food or enriched. Enriched means adding original nutrient back. Okay, so now we are eating white flour with iron, B1, 2, 3, folate, and these vitamins and mineral have been originally founded on the floor, but due to the manufacturing or food processing, now we are getting back these mineral and vitamins back to the enriched flour, but they are originally part of it. When you hear the word fortifying, it means you are adding a nutrient to food that might not have that nutrient in the first place. So it's very important to remember the differences between enriched and fortifying. So why we need the whole wheat flour? Because you're gonna see more of fibers, okay? You're gonna eat the bran, you're gonna eat the mineral, you're gonna eat the vitamins besides to the white flour, okay? So what about digestion and absorption and regulation related to carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are primarily absorbed as monosaccharide. That tells us disaccharide and starch must be digested, but first need to be broken down. Carbohydrates digestion begins in the mouth as chewing breaks down food and mixes it with saliva. Saliva contains amylase, with a short half-life because the food stays for a short period of time in your mouth. So the process moving or pushing food toward the end of your GI system. Pretty straightforward. Fiber is not digested and delaying the gastric emptying time, which is very important to regulate your blood sugar, cholesterol, and to reduce glycemic index, which we're gonna mention in a little bit. What about regulation? Do you think any regulation process for the concentration of glucose? Of course. It's tightly regulated glucose in your body. When the level of glucose goes up, the pancreas starts to release the hormone insulin. And insulin interact with different receptors in our cells to promote the movement of glucose from the blood toward these cells. However, it's very important to know, like after any meal, especially if it's a big meal, the liver, the muscle, and fat cells will take a lot more glucose out of the blood than what they really need. And this will give a good opportunity for the glucose curves and levels to quickly return to the normal curve. Insulin directs muscle and liver. So in the presence of insulin, muscle and liver, and to a lesser extent, some other tissue like fat or heart muscle, to store extra carbohydrate as glycogen. So it's very important to remember, like when there is insulin, carbohydrate will be stored as glycogen, which is meant to be a short-term, not a long-term energy reservoir. Our liver can store up to 8% of its weight, like that represent 75 to 100 gram, while the skeleton muscle can store up to 500 gram. But this represents almost 1% of the mass of the muscle. Always remember that excessive carbohydrate intake can be converted to fat and decrease daily fat use, leading to increased body fat. In another word, once there's insulin, insulin response to a meal or something contain carbohydrates, this insulin will increase the conversion of carbs to glycogen and then to fat. Not only that, once you have insulin level up in your body, this will inhibit the breakdown of fat. So you are not going to use fat as source of energy. So this guides us to one of the healthy behavior in eating food and making choices to emphasize the importance of having small and frequent meals. So in this way, we don't leave the insulin to be really up in your body, and because this is going to enhance the production of fat and decrease the use of fat as source of energy. And this could lead to obesity and overweight and different health issue on the long run. Lactose intolerance is very interesting topic. Lactose intolerance by early childhood. Individuals, especially from Africa, Asian, Greek descent, they lose the ability to produce sufficient amount of digestive enzyme, which is lactase. That's why we call it lactose intolerance. In fact, this lactase production decrease, and almost 90% by age of 5, children start to suffer from lactose intolerance. In contrast, other countries such as Swedes and Finns, actually, and some Caucasian in the United States, the incidence of lactose intolerance is really low. Now, undigested lactose is not absorbed, due to the lack of this enzyme. And the food continues to move throughout your GI system towards the colon where it becomes available to bacteria. Lactose intolerance can be diagnosed actually by a very simple test. It's called hydrogen breath test. The gases actually that produced during lactose intolerance or in lactose intolerant people lead to bothering symptoms like bloating, cramming, and flatulence. But how we can treat that, you either know how much you really need of dairy product, so you can know your limit. You can totally avoid it. You can use sometimes lactase pills or acidophilus milk, which is type of bacteria. So this is very common, and you might encounter several patients with lactose intolerance. So please read more about it and different type of lactose intolerance, and you'll find some genetic basis behind the lactose intolerance. Sugar, sucrose, inverted sugar, corn syrup. In general, we call it added sugar. So as we mentioned earlier, people should focus on healthier carbohydrate, healthier eating habits, such as whole grain products, because we can get fibers, minerals, vitamins out of it. Fruit and vegetables, very important. Fibers, very important. These food provide vitamins, minerals, fibers, besides the phytochemicals that promote good health. But once it comes to added sugar, actually shouldn't exceed 25% of the calorie. And why is that? Because it makes sense that food with high in added sugars are linked to excessive calories, okay? And thus, as a result or as a consequence, excessive calorie consumption will lead to obesity, as well being linked either directly or indirectly to heart diseases, cancer, diabetes, osteoporosis, and other health issues. If you want to measure your daily limit of added sugar, or you want to make a limit for yourself, you can convert it to a teaspoon. So you need actually less than 20 teaspoons per day. Now, roughly 10 teaspoons is the amount of sugar in almost one soft drink. This is what 10 teaspoons represent. The problem also nowadays, we find added sugar in every thing we eat, kind of junk food or prepared food. So pizza could have added sugar, bread, hot dog, crackers, spaghetti sauce, even the salad dressing salad dressing has really good amount of added sugar. Mayonnaise, fruit drinks, yogurt with flavors also has added sugar in it. So you always need to pay attention and be careful of what you're really eating. Fibers, daily value 25 grams. You can go up a little bit, but don't limit fiber or don't remove it from your diet. What about alternative sugars? Are they the solution? Sometimes, like if you want to make your choices and you want to find the best sweetener to avoid such plain sugar, which is contain high calories, you might think about different options. You can think about saccharine, actually produced or discovered more than 100 years ago, saccharine. And it's at least 300 times sweeter than sucrose or the plain the table sugar. But as it was connected once with bladder cancer in rats, and several reports found out the amount consumed by rats was really huge. But still, the cancer promoting potential of saccharin in people is still actually debated. Aspartame is 200 times sweeter than sucrose. It's actually two amino acids linked together, phenylalanine and aspartic acid, and this make you you should be alert when you are prescribing it, or you're trying to help people to find the best sweetener if they have kind of different diseases such as phenylketonuria. So you have to be careful. Saccharose. What about saccharose, which is I think, yeah, it's almost 600 times sweeter. It's made by exchanging 3 chlorine atoms per hydroxy group on the saccharose. That's why the pronunciation seem almost similar, saccharose and saccharose. Do we have something natural here? What about stevia? I'm pretty sure you heard about stevia. It's not artificial, derived from South Central America. In the US, considered as dietary supplement, but it's really approved in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand to be used. What about sugar alcohol that we mentioned at the beginning of this lecture? Sugar alcohol such as xylitol, lactitol, mannitol, actually recognized as artificial sweeteners. One thing about them, which is a good thing, either you find it in candies, cookies, chewing gums, they don't promote cavities the same way the plain sugar does. Besides, they really contain some calories. So they do have calorie, but to a lesser extent than the plain sugar. So this is about the sugar alcohol that we need to be aware of. So this is the end of the class. I hope you got a good picture of carbohydrates. It was almost a brief summary, or in a nutshell, illustration of carbs, importance. Maybe we need just to mention one thing very important about carbohydrates, and this is one of the main goals, why they are important. Carbs. Why we really care about carbs? Why we eat them? Carbs actually are a good energy source for all your body cells. They are a very vital component of cell membrane. They're playing a significant role in fat metabolism. And if you think about DNA and RNA, they contain the carbohydrate ribose, which is made of glucose. If you go to the pharmacy and you start looking for some OTCs over the counter, you find glycosaminoglycan, which is carbohydrates actually, complex carbohydrates, good for connective tissue and joint. So carbohydrates have several roles in your body and several advantages. Just remember making healthy food choices and following healthy behaviors when you're trying to pick the right carbohydrates, and when you're following the dietary reference intake based in the US and the Canadian guideline, less than 65% of the total calorie, you would really earn the benefits of carbohydrates. If you have any question, we can deal with it in our next online lecture. Thank you so much.